The day my grandson Jake looked me dead in the eye and said, "Grandma, you're too old to understand how the world works anymore." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart breaking, no, this was different. This was the sound of my patience finally snapping after months of condescending remarks and dismissive glances from my own family. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, and I was sitting at my kitchen table trying to explain why I thought their plan to put me in assisted living was premature. At 73, I still drove myself to the grocery store, maintained my own home, and had been successfully managing my late husband's engineering consulting business for the past 5 years since his passing. But apparently none of that mattered to them. "Mom, you just don't get it," my daughter Sarah chimed in, not even looking up from her phone. "Technology has passed you by. The world is different now. You can't keep pretending you can handle everything on your own." My son David nodded in agreement, his arms crossed as he leaned against my kitchen counter. "We're not trying to be mean, but let's be realistic here. When's the last time you used a computer for anything other than checking email? Do you even know what social media is?" Jake, my 25-year-old grandson who had recently graduated with a degree in computer science, actually laughed at his father's comment. "Dad, she probably thinks Twitter is something birds do. Grandma, no offense, but your generation just isn't wired for innovation anymore. Your brains are too set in their ways." I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, feeling smaller with each word. These were the people I had raised, the family I had sacrificed everything for, and they were treating me like I was already mentally incompetent. The irony wasn't lost on me that we were having this conversation in the same kitchen where I had helped Jake with his math homework every day after school, where I had taught Sarah how to balance a checkbook, where I had encouraged David to pursue his engineering degree even when everyone else said he wasn't smart enough. "We found a lovely place called Sunset Manor," Sarah continued, finally putting down her phone to show me a brochure. "They have activities, meals are prepared for you, and there's medical staff on site 24/7. You'd have your own little apartment, but you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this big house anymore." I looked around my kitchen, the kitchen where my husband Harold and I had shared coffee every morning for 47 years, where we had discussed his latest engineering projects, where I had learned to understand blueprint specifications and client requirements well enough to keep his business running after his sudden heart attack. This wasn't just a house to me. It was the foundation of everything I had built. "I don't need assisted living," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." David sighed dramatically. "Mom, yesterday you called me because you couldn't figure out how to update your computer." "That was a legitimate technical issue," I protested. "The automatic update had corrupted some files, and I needed help recovering them." Jake rolled his eyes. "Grandma, that's exactly what we're talking about. Normal people just restart their computer when something like that happens. You don't need to recover files for a simple update. You're overthinking everything because you don't understand how modern technology actually works." The condescension in his voice was like a slap. This was the same boy I had driven to robotics club every Saturday for 3 years in high school, the same boy who used to beg me to tell him stories about his grandfather's engineering projects, the same boy who had once called me the smartest person he knew. "Honey," Sarah said, reaching across the table to pat my hand like I was a child, "we know this is hard to hear, but we're worried about you. You're isolated out here, you barely leave the house except for necessities, and you spend all your time in that garage doing whatever it is you do out there." What I did in that garage was work. Real work. The same kind of problem-solving and innovation that had made Harold's engineering firm successful for over 3 decades. But how could I explain that to them when they had already decided I was a relic from a bygone era? For the past 18 months, ever since Harold's funeral, my family had been treating me like I was gradually losing my faculties. It had started small, Sarah insisting on coming with me to doctor's appointments, just in case I forgot to mention something important. Then David began handling my taxes without asking, claiming it was too complicated for someone my age to manage. Jake had even gone so far as to suggest I shouldn't be driving at night anymore, despite the fact that I had never had an accident in my entire life. The worst part was how they talked about me when they thought I couldn't hear. Last Christmas, I had walked into the living room to find them in a heated discussion about my declining mental state. Sarah was worried I was becoming a hoarder, because I kept Harold's tools and project materials in the garage, David thought I was developing dementia because I sometimes forgot minor details about conversations from weeks earlier. Jake was convinced I was dangerously out of touch with reality because I didn't use social media or online shopping. None of them seemed to remember that I had been Harold's business partner in everything but title. When clients called with technical questions, Harold would often put them on speaker so I could contribute to the problem-solving process. When he was working on a particularly challenging project, we would discuss potential solutions over dinner every night until we found the right approach. I might not have had the formal engineering degree, but I had learned from one of the best, and I had 47 years of hands-on experience with complex technical challenges. But apparently, that experience meant nothing now that I was officially a senior citizen. The thing is, Mom, David continued, we're not asking you to make this decision right away. We just want you to visit Sunset Manor and see what they have to offer. Meet some people your own age, see if you might actually enjoy having less responsibility. People my own age. As if age was the only thing that mattered about a person's identity or capabilities. I thought about Mrs. Henderson down the street, who was 81 and still volunteered as a tax preparer during filing season. I thought about Mr. Rodriguez at the hardware store, who was 78 and could diagnose any mechanical problem just by listening to the sounds a machine made. Were they supposed to give up their skills and experience just because they had reached some arbitrary age threshold? What about Harold's business? I asked. I still have 3 active clients, and the Riverside project won't be completed until next year. Jake laughed again, that dismissive sound that made me want to scream. Grandma, that's exactly what we're talking about. You can't possibly be managing an engineering consulting business at your age. What happens if you make a mistake? What happens if you miss something important? People could get hurt. The implication that I was incompetent stung more than I wanted to admit. These 3 clients weren't just paying for Harold's reputation. They were paying for results, and I had been delivering those results consistently for 5 years. The Riverside Municipal Water System upgrade was actually ahead of schedule and under budget, thanks to some innovative filtration solutions I had researched and proposed. But none of that mattered to my family. In their minds, I had somehow become a liability overnight, simply because I had reached an age they associated with decline and irrelevance. We're not trying to hurt your feelings, Sarah said, though her tone suggested otherwise. We're trying to help you transition into the next phase of your life gracefully. Wouldn't it be nice to not have to worry about business deadlines and client meetings? Wouldn't it be nice to just relax and enjoy your golden years? My golden years. Another phrase that made my skin crawl. As if reaching 70 meant I was supposed to abandon everything that gave my life purpose and meaning. As if I was supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to become decorative furniture in someone else's carefully managed environment. I enjoy the work, I said simply. It keeps my mind sharp, it honors Harold's memory, and it provides a sense of purpose. I'm not ready to retire. David shook his head impatiently. Mom, you're not retiring. You're being realistic about your limitations. There's a difference. My limitations. According to them, my limitations included an inability to understand technology, an inability to manage complex tasks, an inability to live independently, and an inability to contribute meaningfully to society. Apparently, the simple act of aging had transformed me from a capable, intelligent woman into a burden who needed to be managed and contained. I looked at each of their faces, my daughter, my son, my grandson, and realized that they genuinely believed they were being kind. They thought they were protecting me from embarrassment and failure. They thought they were saving me from the inevitable decline they assumed was already underway. But what they were really doing was erasing me. They were taking everything I had learned, everything I had accomplished, everything I still had to offer, and dismissing it as irrelevant simply because I had been born 73 years ago instead of 33 or 43. That night, after they left with promises to continue this conversation soon, I sat in my garage surrounded by Harold's tools and my own projects, trying to process what had just happened. The garage had become my sanctuary over the past 18 months, the one place where I could work on problems that interested me without anyone questioning my capabilities or suggesting I was too old to understand. The space was organized exactly the way Harold had left it, with specialized tools arranged on pegboards, reference books sorted by topic, and multiple workbenches for different types of projects. But I had added my own touches, a computer station where I researched new technologies and methodologies, filing cabinets for client projects and personal innovations, and a comfortable chair where I could think through complex problems. This was where I had been spending most of my time since Harold's death, not because I was hiding from the world, but because this was where I felt most like myself. This was where I could combine Harold's technical expertise with my own analytical skills and create solutions that actually worked. And this was where I had been working on something that could change everything. For the past 14 months, I had been developing what I believed could be a revolutionary improvement to residential water filtration systems. The idea had come to me while working on the Riverside Municipal Project, when I realized that the same principles we were using to purify water for an entire city could be scaled down and adapted for individual homes. The problem with most home filtration systems was that they were either too expensive for average families or not effective enough to remove all contaminants. They required frequent filter replacements, took up significant space, and often reduced water pressure to inconvenient levels. What families needed was something affordable, compact, highly effective, and low maintenance. I had been approaching this challenge the same way Harold had taught me to approach all engineering problems, by identifying the core requirements, researching existing solutions, understanding their limitations, and then finding innovative ways to overcome those limitations. The breakthrough had come 6 months earlier, when I realized that combining certain materials in a specific configuration could create a filtration system that was not only more effective than existing options, but also self-cleaning and incredibly long-lasting. The key was using a proprietary blend of activated carbon, ceramic filters, and a specialized membrane that could remove virtually all contaminants while maintaining excellent water pressure. I had built 3 prototypes in my garage, each one improving on the previous design. The current version was compact enough to fit under a standard kitchen sink, required filter replacement only once every 2 years instead of every few months, and provided filtration quality that exceeded EPA standards for municipal water treatment. But the real innovation was the smart monitoring system I had integrated into the design. Using some basic sensors and a simple microprocessor, the system could automatically track filter life, water quality, and system performance, alerting homeowners when maintenance was needed and providing real-time data about their water quality through a smartphone app. I knew the technical aspects were sound. I had been testing the system in my own home for 4 months, and the results were consistently excellent. What I wasn't sure about was whether anyone would take my invention seriously, coming from a 73-year-old woman with no formal engineering degree. That uncertainty had kept me from moving forward with patents or manufacturing discussions. Every time I thought about presenting my work to potential investors or partners, I could hear my family's voices in my head, telling me I was too old to understand how the modern world worked, too out of touch to create anything relevant or valuable. But sitting in my garage that Tuesday night, still stinging from their condescending remarks about my mental decline and their plans to warehouse me in assisted living, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to prove them wrong. I was going to show them exactly what this supposedly obsolete old woman was capable of understanding and creating. I was going to turn their dismissive assumptions into the motivation I needed to take my invention from prototype to reality. And I was going to do it all without telling them a single thing about what I was working on until it was too late for them to try to stop me or take credit for my success. The next morning, I woke up with more energy and purpose than I had felt in months. The first step was to protect my intellectual property, which meant filing for a provisional patent. I had researched the process extensively and knew I could handle the application myself, but I wanted to make sure everything was done correctly. I called Patricia Morrison, a patent attorney I had met through Harold's business connections, and scheduled an appointment for later that week. Patricia had always treated me as an equal partner in Harold's firm, and I trusted her to take my invention seriously regardless of my age. The second step was to document everything thoroughly. I spent the next 3 days creating detailed technical drawings, performance specifications, test results, and manufacturing cost estimates. I photographed the prototypes from every angle and compiled a comprehensive portfolio that demonstrated not only what my invention could do, but exactly how it worked and why it was superior to existing alternatives. The third step was to research potential markets and applications. I knew my system would appeal to environmentally conscious families, people with health concerns about water quality, and anyone who wanted to reduce the long-term costs of home water filtration. But I also realized it could have applications in small businesses, schools, and even disaster relief situations where clean water access was critical. By the time I met with Patricia on Friday afternoon, I had assembled a presentation that would have impressed Harold himself. Patricia spent 2 hours reviewing my documentation, asking technical questions, and examining the prototype I had brought to her office. "Elizabeth," she said finally, "this is remarkable work. The technical specifications are solid, the market research is thorough, and the innovation is genuinely significant. I think you have the foundation for a very successful product." Hearing those words from a professional I respected was like oxygen after months of suffocating condescension from my family. "You really think it has commercial potential?" "I think it has extraordinary commercial potential," Patricia replied. "The home water filtration market is worth billions of dollars annually, and most of the current products have significant limitations that your system appears to solve. The smart monitoring features alone could justify a premium price point." She agreed to handle the patent applications and recommended a business consultant who specialized in helping inventors transition from prototype to production. Within a week, I had meetings scheduled with a manufacturing consultant, a marketing strategist, and a venture capital firm that focused on environmental technology. I felt like I was 25 years old again, starting Harold's business from scratch in our garage. The excitement of solving complex problems, the thrill of innovation, the satisfaction of creating something that could make a real difference in people's lives. All of these feelings came flooding back as I threw myself into developing my invention into a viable business. The most challenging aspect wasn't the technical work, or even the business planning. The most challenging aspect was keeping everything secret from my family, while they continued to treat me like an incompetent senior citizen who needed constant supervision and management. 2 weeks after our kitchen table confrontation, Sarah called to schedule another discussion about my living situation. She had apparently made an appointment for me to tour Sunset Manor the following Thursday, and she wanted to prepare me for what to expect. "I know change is scary at your age," she said, using that patronizing tone that made me want to throw the phone across the room. "But I really think you'll be surprised by how much you enjoy having other people take care of the day-to-day responsibilities." Other people. As if I was incapable of taking care of myself, as if independence was a burden rather than a privilege, as if I should be grateful to surrender my autonomy to strangers who would manage my life according to their schedules and preferences. "Sarah, I've told you repeatedly that I'm not interested in assisted living," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and measured. "I'm perfectly capable of managing my own home and my own affairs." "Mom, we've been through this. You're not as capable as you think you are. Just last week you had trouble with your computer again, and yesterday David had to explain how to use the new microwave 3 times. The computer issue had been a legitimate software conflict that required advanced troubleshooting, and the microwave situation had been a matter of learning unfamiliar controls on a device I hadn't asked anyone to replace." But in Sarah's narrative, these normal learning experiences became evidence of cognitive decline and incompetence. "I'm not going to tour assisted living facilities," I said firmly. "I'm not ready to give up my independence, and I'm not going to make decisions based on fear of hypothetical future problems." Sarah sighed dramatically. "Mom, denial isn't healthy. We're not asking you to give up your independence. We're asking you to be realistic about what you can handle at your age. There's no shame in admitting that you need help." I needed help. According to my family, I needed help with technology, with decision-making, with managing my own life, with understanding the modern world, and with accepting the inevitable decline of my mental and physical capabilities. What I actually needed was for them to stop treating me like a child and start recognizing that experience and wisdom have value regardless of age. But I didn't argue further. Instead, I hung up the phone and went back to work on my business plan. I had manufacturing quotes to review, patent applications to finalize, and investor presentations to prepare. I had real work to do, important work that could actually make a difference in the world. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my family was planning to institutionalize me because they believed I was losing my mental faculties, I was simultaneously developing a technological innovation that could revolutionize an entire industry. While they were debating whether I was competent enough to choose my own meals, I was creating something that demonstrated not only technical expertise but also business acumen and market insight. 3 weeks later, I had my first meeting with potential investors. The venture capital firm Patricia had recommended specialized in environmental technology and had a track record of helping inventors scale their innovations into successful businesses. I was nervous, not about presenting my invention, but about whether they would take me seriously once they saw my age. I needn't have worried. The presentation went better than I had dared to hope. "Mrs. Patterson," said Jennifer Walsh, the lead partner, "this is exactly the kind of innovation we look for. Technically sound, commercially viable, and addressing a significant market need. The smart monitoring system is particularly impressive. Have you considered the potential for integration with home automation platforms?" I had actually. That was one of the features I planned to develop in the second generation of the product. But hearing Jennifer discuss expansion possibilities and market opportunities, as if my age was completely irrelevant, was incredibly validating. The meeting lasted 3 hours. We discussed manufacturing strategies, marketing approaches, competitive positioning, and financial projections. Jennifer and her team asked detailed technical questions that I was able to answer confidently, drawing on both Harold's expertise and my own research and development work. At the end of the meeting, Jennifer made me an offer that took my breath away. Her firm was willing to provide initial funding for manufacturing setup and market testing in exchange for a minority stake in the company. They believed my filtration system could capture a significant share of the residential market within 3 years, with potential expansion into commercial applications. "We'd like to move forward as quickly as possible," Jennifer said. "The home water filtration market is competitive, but your innovation gives us a significant advantage. How soon could you have production-ready units available for market testing?" 6 months, I told her. 6 months to finalize the design, set up manufacturing, complete regulatory approvals, and begin production. 6 months to prove that this supposedly obsolete old woman could create something valuable and important. I left that meeting feeling like I was walking on air. For the first time since Harold's death, I had a clear vision of my future. Not as a burdensome senior citizen who needed to be managed and contained, but as an entrepreneur and innovator who was just getting started. But the best part was still ahead of me. The best part would be seeing my family's faces when they realized exactly how wrong they had been about my capabilities and potential. I spent the next 4 months working 18-hour days to meet the production timeline Jennifer and I had agreed upon. The garage became a full-scale research and development facility, with additional equipment for testing, quality control, and small-batch manufacturing. I hired 2 part-time assistants, both recent engineering graduates who were impressed by the technical sophistication of my design and treated me as a mentor rather than a charity case. During this period, my family's pressure about assisted living continued to intensify. David started showing up unannounced to check on me, usually finding me in the garage working on what he assumed were meaningless hobby projects. Sarah scheduled multiple tours of senior living facilities without my consent, then expressed frustration when I refused to attend. Jake began making pointed comments about how sad it was to see elderly people who couldn't accept their limitations. The cognitive dissonance was extraordinary. While they were questioning my ability to manage basic daily tasks, I was simultaneously coordinating with manufacturers, negotiating contracts, managing product testing, and preparing for a market launch that would put my invention in stores across the country. I had to bite my tongue constantly to avoid revealing what I was working on. There were moments when their condescension became so unbearable that I wanted to shout about the investors who believed in my vision, the engineers who respected my expertise, and the business partners who treated me as an equal. But I knew the reveal would be more powerful if it came after my success was undeniable. The breakthrough moment came in July, 5 months after that painful kitchen table conversation. Jennifer called to tell me that our initial market testing had exceeded all expectations. The first batch of filtration systems had sold out within 2 weeks, customer satisfaction ratings were through the roof, and early reviews were calling it revolutionary and game-changing. "Elizabeth, we need to accelerate our production timeline," Jennifer said, barely containing her excitement. "We're getting inquiries from major retailers, and there's already buzz in the industry about your innovation. I think we're looking at something much bigger than we initially projected." Much bigger indeed. Within another month, we had signed distribution agreements with 3 major home improvement chains and 2 online retailers. A prominent technology magazine had featured my filtration system in their annual Innovations That Matter issue. An environmental advocacy organization had given us their award for sustainable technology design. And through it all, my family continued to treat me like a declining senior citizen who needed supervision and protection from the complexities of modern life. The final pieces fell into place in September. The patent applications were approved, giving me full intellectual property protection for my innovations. The manufacturing partnership was formalized, with projected production of 50,000 units by the end of the year. The marketing campaign was launched, featuring testimonials from early customers and endorsements from water quality experts. Most importantly, I received news that would change everything. My invention had been selected as the winner of the National Innovation Award for Environmental Technology, with a ceremony scheduled for October 15th at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. The award came with a 00000 prize, national media coverage, and recognition from the highest levels of government and industry. Winners were featured in major newspapers, interviewed on television programs, and celebrated as examples of American innovation and entrepreneurship. I was going to be honored not just as an inventor, but as an entrepreneur who had created something that could make a real difference in people's lives. And I was going to receive this recognition at age 73, proving definitively that innovation and achievement have nothing to do with arbitrary age limitations. It was time to let my family know exactly what this supposedly obsolete old woman had been working on in her garage. I called Sarah first, using the same casual tone she always used when discussing my limitations. "Hi, honey," I said. "I wanted to let you know that I won't be able to make dinner on Sunday. I'll be in Washington, D.C., receiving an award." "An award?" Sarah sounded confused. "What kind of award?" "The National Innovation Award for Environmental Technology. It's being presented at the Smithsonian. There's a ceremony and everything." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, Sarah found her voice. "Mom, what are you talking about? You can't have won a National Innovation Award. That doesn't make sense." "Why doesn't it make sense?" I asked innocently. "Because I'm too old to understand how the world works." Another long silence. "Mom, I don't understand what's happening here. Can you please explain what you're talking about?" So I did. I told her about the water filtration system I had been developing in my garage for the past 18 months. I told her about the patents, the investors, the manufacturing agreements, and the retail partnerships. I told her about the market testing results and the customer reviews and the industry recognition. I told her about the company I had built while she was planning to put me in assisted living because she thought I was losing my mental faculties. When I finished, the silence stretched on so long that I wondered if the call had been dropped. Finally, Sarah spoke, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "You've been running a business? A real business?" "Yes," I said simply. "The same way your father ran his business, and the same way I helped him run it for 47 years. The only difference is that this time, I'm doing it on my own." But you said you needed help with your computer. You said you didn't understand modern technology." "I needed help with a specific software issue, which is different from not understanding technology in general. And I never said I didn't understand modern technology. You decided that I was too old to understand it, despite all evidence to the contrary." I could hear her trying to process this information, trying to reconcile her assumptions about my limitations with the reality of what I had accomplished. It was like watching someone's worldview crumble in real time. How much money are you making from this business?" she asked. "Enough," I replied. "Enough to maintain my independence, enough to continue living in my own home, and enough to prove that experience and wisdom have value regardless of age." The conversation with David went similarly, though he was more skeptical than shocked. He seemed to think I was exaggerating my role in the company's success, suggesting that the investors and engineers were probably just being polite to an elderly woman who thought she had contributed more than she actually had. "Mom, I'm glad you found something to keep you busy," he said condescendingly. "But let's not get carried away here. You didn't single-handedly revolutionize an entire industry. These business people are probably just humoring you." "David," I said patiently, "I am the sole inventor of the filtration technology. I hold all the patents. I own the majority stake in the company. The National Innovation Award is being given to me personally, not to my business partners or investors. There's no one to humor. This is my achievement. But the best reaction came from Jake, my grandson, who had laughed at the idea that someone my age could understand innovation. "Grandma," he said, after I had explained the entire situation, "are you telling me that you've been developing cutting-edge technology this whole time? Like, actual high-tech innovation?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," I replied. "The same technology you claimed I was too old to understand. But you asked me about social media and online shopping. You seemed confused about modern technology. I asked you about social media because I was genuinely curious about how it worked, not because I was incapable of learning. I seemed confused about online shopping because I had never needed to use it before, not because the concept was beyond my comprehension. There's a difference between not having experience with something and not being capable of understanding it." I could practically hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to reconcile his assumptions about elderly people with the grandmother who had just told him she was about to be honored by the Smithsonian Institution. "So when we said you were too old to understand how the world works," he began slowly. "You were wrong," I finished. "Completely, absolutely wrong. I understand exactly how the world works, and I understand it well enough to create something that will make it work better." The award ceremony was everything I had hoped it would be and more. The Smithsonian's National Museum of American History provided a stunning backdrop for the evening, with displays of historical innovations surrounding the stage where current innovators were being honored. When my name was called, I walked to the podium wearing the same professional confidence I had worn to countless client meetings with Harold over the years. The audience included inventors, entrepreneurs, government officials, and media representatives, people who understood that innovation comes from curiosity, knowledge, and determination, not from age or conventional credentials. When I started working on this project 18 months ago, I told the audience, my family thought I was too old to understand how the modern world works. They were planning to put me in assisted living because they believed I was no longer capable of managing complex tasks or making important decisions. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the typical acceptance speech for a technology award. "I'm 73 years old," I continued, "and according to conventional wisdom, I should be winding down, simplifying my life, and accepting that my most productive years are behind me. But I'm here tonight because I believe that wisdom and experience are resources, not limitations. I'm here because I believe that the desire to solve problems and improve lives doesn't have an expiration date." The applause started slowly but built to a thunderous ovation. I looked out at the audience and saw people of all ages nodding in recognition and approval. I saw older inventors who had faced similar dismissals, younger entrepreneurs who were taking notes about persistence and determination, and business leaders who understood that innovation can come from unexpected sources. My invention didn't succeed because I ignored my age. It succeeded because I embraced everything my age represents. Decades of experience, years of learning from mistakes, the patience to work through complex problems, and the wisdom to distinguish between what's genuinely important and what's merely fashionable. When I returned to my seat with the award in my hands, I felt a satisfaction that went far beyond professional recognition. I had proven that assumptions about aging and capability are not only wrong but dangerous. They cause families to discard valuable resources and encourage society to waste human potential. The media coverage was extensive and overwhelmingly positive. The story of a 73-year-old woman who had revolutionized water filtration technology, while her family was planning her retirement, resonated with audiences across demographic lines. I was interviewed on morning television shows, featured in business magazines, and profiled in newspapers across the country. But the most satisfying media coverage was the local news segment that aired 3 days after the ceremony. The reporter had interviewed me in my garage, surrounded by the tools and equipment where I had developed my award-winning innovation. "This is where it all started," I explained to the camera, gesturing to the workbenches and prototypes that had seemed like meaningless hobby projects to my family. "This is where I spent 18 months proving that age is just a number, and that the capacity for innovation doesn't diminish with experience. It grows stronger." The reporter asked about my family's initial skepticism, and I answered with the grace and dignity that comes from vindication without vindictiveness. They were trying to protect me from what they saw as inevitable failure and disappointment, I said. They couldn't imagine that someone my age could compete in a technology-driven market. And I understand their concern. But what they didn't understand is that success in innovation isn't about being young. It's about being curious, persistent, and willing to solve problems that matter. I knew my family would see the coverage, and I knew they would finally understand the full extent of what I had accomplished while they were debating my mental competence. Sarah called within an hour of the broadcast. "Mom," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "I owe you an apology. A huge apology. I had no idea. I never imagined. I'm so sorry for the way we treated you." "I know you meant well," I replied, because despite everything, I understood that their condescension had come from a place of love, however misguided. "But we didn't mean well," Sarah protested. "We were patronizing and dismissive, and we made assumptions about your capabilities based on nothing but your age. We tried to take away your independence because we decided you were incompetent, and the whole time you were creating something incredible." David's call came next, and his apology was even more heartfelt. "Mom, I feel like a complete fool. Here I was lecturing you about being realistic about your limitations, and you were building a business that's more successful than anything I've ever done. I don't know how you can forgive us for being so blind." "You weren't blind," I said gently. "You were afraid. You saw your father's death and worried that I was next, and you wanted to protect me from anything that might be difficult or challenging. But what you didn't realize is that difficulty and challenge are what keep us alive and engaged." But it was Jake's reaction that moved me the most. He showed up at my door the day after the news coverage aired, and when I opened the door I could see tears in his eyes. "Grandma," he said, "I am so sorry. I laughed at you. I actually laughed at the idea that you could understand innovation, and the whole time you were creating something that puts my computer science degree to shame. I don't know how to apologize for being so arrogant and stupid." I invited him in and made coffee, the same coffee I had been making for him since he was a child. And we sat at the kitchen table where this whole journey had begun. "Jake," I said, "you weren't stupid. You were young. When you're 25, it's hard to imagine that someone who learned to drive before you were born could teach you anything about technology or innovation. But intelligence and creativity don't peak at 30 and disappear at 60. They evolve and deepen with experience." "But I was so dismissive," he said. "I treated you like you were already senile, like your brain was too old to handle complex concepts. And you were developing technology that I couldn't have conceived of. That's because you were looking at age as a limitation instead of an asset," I explained. "You saw my 73 years as evidence that I was losing my faculties, instead of evidence that I had accumulated 73 years of knowledge, problem-solving experience, and hard-earned wisdom." We talked for hours that afternoon about innovation and entrepreneurship, about the value of different types of intelligence, and about the ways that society's assumptions about aging create barriers that shouldn't exist. Jake asked detailed questions about my filtration technology, my business development process, and my future plans for the company. "Grandma," he said as he was getting ready to leave, "would you consider letting me work for you? I know I don't deserve it after the way I treated you, but I would love to learn from someone who actually understands what innovation means." 6 months later, Jake became my company's first full-time employee, handling digital marketing and technology integration. He brought energy and contemporary technical skills to complement my experience and strategic thinking. Working together, we developed the second generation of my filtration system, with enhanced smart home integration and expanded monitoring capabilities. Sarah became my unofficial PR manager, helping me navigate media requests and speaking opportunities. She had always been good with people and communication, and she threw herself into promoting my company with the enthusiasm of someone trying to make amends for past mistakes. David provided business consulting services, using his engineering background to help optimize manufacturing processes and quality control systems. His attention to detail and systematic approach proved invaluable as we scaled production to meet growing demand. The family that had once planned to institutionalize me, because they thought I was losing my mental faculties, became the foundation of my business team. They brought different skills and perspectives that enhanced my original vision, and they treated me with the respect and recognition I had been seeking all along. But the most rewarding aspect of my success wasn't the financial returns or industry recognition, though both were satisfying. The most rewarding aspect was the letters I received from other older adults who had seen my story and found inspiration to pursue their own delayed dreams and dismissed ideas. A 78-year-old retired teacher wrote to tell me she had finally submitted the children's book she had been working on for years, despite her family's suggestion that no one would take a new author her age seriously. A 69-year-old former accountant wrote about the small business he had started after seeing my television interviews, creating custom furniture designs he had been sketching for decades. Most touching was a letter from an 81-year-old woman whose family had been pressuring her to sell her home and move to assisted living, despite her desire to remain independent. My story had given her the courage to resist their pressure and advocate for her own choices about how to live her remaining years. "You showed me that age is not a disqualification from achievement," she wrote. "You showed me that experience is a resource, not a burden, and that the desire to contribute and create doesn't have to end at some arbitrary age limit." These letters reminded me that my invention was about more than water filtration technology. It was about challenging assumptions, refusing to accept limitations imposed by others, and proving that human potential doesn't diminish with age if we refuse to let it diminish. 2 years after that painful kitchen table conversation where my family dismissed me as too old to understand the modern world, my company has annual revenues exceeding $2 million. Our filtration systems are sold in over 3,000 retail locations, and I've been invited to speak at business conferences and innovation summits across the country. I still live in the same house where Harold and I raised our children, but now it's also the headquarters of Patterson Water Solutions, a company that employs 12 people and holds patents on technology that's improving water quality for families nationwide. The garage where my family thought I was puttering around with meaningless hobby projects is now a state-of-the-art research and development facility where we continue to innovate and improve our products. My assisted living brochures have been replaced by business magazines featuring my company on their covers. My family's concerns about my mental decline have been replaced by their pride in my entrepreneurial success. Their patronizing suggestions about accepting my limitations have been replaced by their genuine respect for my expertise and leadership. But the most important change is in how I see myself and my future. Instead of accepting the narrative that my productive years were behind me, I've proven that my most innovative and impactful years were just beginning. Instead of surrendering to other people's assumptions about what someone my age could accomplish, I've created my own definition of what's possible. At 75, I'm not winding down. I'm scaling up. We're developing new product lines, exploring international markets, and researching applications for our technology in commercial and industrial settings. I'm mentoring young entrepreneurs who are learning that wisdom and experience are competitive advantages in any field. I wake up every morning excited about the problems I'll solve, the innovations I'll develop, and the assumptions I'll challenge. I go to sleep every night knowing that age is not a limitation unless we allow it to become one, and that the capacity for growth, learning, and achievement has nothing to do with the number of years we've been alive. My family learned that dismissing someone based on their age is not just insulting, it's wasteful. Society has a tendency to discard people the moment they reach some arbitrary age threshold, assuming that their productive contributions are finished and their potential for innovation has expired. But potential doesn't have an expiration date. Curiosity doesn't diminish with age. The desire to solve problems and improve lives doesn't disappear when we reach retirement age. What diminishes is society's expectation that older adults can continue contributing meaningfully to innovation and progress. When my grandson Jake said I was too old to understand how the world works, he was reflecting assumptions that are not just wrong but dangerous. These assumptions cause families to underestimate their older members, businesses to ignore experienced perspectives, and society to waste vast reserves of knowledge and capability. My water filtration system succeeded not despite my age, but because of everything my age represented: decades of accumulated knowledge, years of problem-solving experience, the patience to work through complex challenges, and the wisdom to focus on solutions that truly matter. The world didn't pass me by when I turned 70. I didn't become irrelevant or obsolete or incapable of understanding modern technology. What happened was that other people's expectations of me changed, and they began treating me as if I had lost capabilities I had never actually lost. The difference between being dismissed and being celebrated was not any change in my actual abilities. It was proving those abilities in a way that couldn't be ignored or explained away. Now, when young entrepreneurs ask me about the secret to innovation at any age, I tell them that the secret is refusing to accept other people's limitations as your own reality. The secret is understanding that experience is an asset, not a liability, and that the combination of knowledge and wisdom that comes with age is exactly what the world needs to solve its most complex challenges. I tell them that when someone says you're too old to understand, too old to compete, or too old to create something meaningful, they're really saying that they don't understand the value of everything you've learned and experienced. And I tell them that the best response to that dismissal is not to argue or defend or explain. It's to prove them wrong so definitively that their assumptions become impossible to maintain. My family thought I was too old to understand how the modern world works. Instead, I showed them that I understand it well enough to change it one innovative solution at a time. They wanted to protect me from the complexity and challenge of contemporary life. Instead, I embraced that complexity and used it to create something that makes life better for thousands of families. They saw my age as evidence of decline and limitation. Instead, I used my age as the foundation for achievement and impact that exceeded anything I had accomplished in my supposedly more capable younger years. The kitchen table where they told me I was too old to understand has become the conference table, where we plan our company's expansion into new markets and applications. The garage where they thought I was avoiding reality has become the laboratory where we continue developing solutions to real-world problems. And the woman they dismissed as obsolete has become the entrepreneur and innovator they now turn to for advice about business strategy, technological development, and the courage to pursue ambitious goals regardless of what others think is possible. When people ask me what I want my legacy to be, I tell them I want to be remembered as the woman who proved that age is just a number, that experience is a superpower, and that the best response to being underestimated is achievement so remarkable that it changes not just your own life, but everyone's understanding of what's possible. I want to be remembered as the 73-year-old grandmother who heard her family say she was too old to understand the modern world, and responded by creating technology that made the world work better for everyone. That's a legacy I can live with, and it's a story that's still being written every day in my garage-turned-laboratory, where age is just another variable in the equation of innovation, and where the only limitations that matter are the ones we impose on ourselves.